Welcome to The Married Therapist,
a relationship podcast
hosted by us, Luis and Amber Semidey.
This podcast is all about love, conflict, and the gray areas.
If you like what you hear, be sure to like and subscribe wherever you're listening. Now let's get to the show. Today we're going to talk about whether or not we believe the phrase, once a cheater, always a cheater. So I'll let you start. What do you think about that as a concept?
So that's very extreme.
It is.
What I'm hearing is black or white.
Yeah.
We all live in shades of gray. Little psych ed. Black or white or all or nothing thinking is under the category of a cognitive distortion.
Right. Yes, it is.
So I think we got to throw away the word always. Now, some people may be saying, oh, you're being whatever. But no, we really have to watch our words. When we say always, when we say never, that truly doesn't help a lot of the situations we're talking about. I understand the sentiment, though. I'm a human.
Yeah.
I do think that if you've cheated and you haven't done the work, you're probably going to cheat again.
Yeah.
This thing of, oops, my bad, sorry, I'm going to be better, and there's no evidence of changed behavior. It'll be a new partner, but same old you. And so the things that were occurring when you cheated before are probably going to be popping up again. Now, do I think there's such thing as a reformed cheater? Yeah, I do. Because people can indeed change if they recognize the toll that it took.
Mm-hmm.
If they understand, wow, I wouldn't want that done to me. And there's a whole bunch of other factors. But there are a group of people out there who do the hard work, who are introspective. Maybe they realized they cheated because they were insecure. Maybe they realized they cheated because they had poor communication skills. They weren't communicating their needs to their partner. Maybe they realized they cheated because they had issues with like self-control and kind of needed to work on their impulses. I think you can go to therapy. Even if you don't go to therapy, but you read some books.
Yeah, watching YouTube videos.
Listen to some podcasts. Talk to a mentor. Pray, whatever it is, to experience this deep level of insight and awareness. Absolutely. So if you do that, especially while you're single, and then you meet the next person, you could be Brad 2.0.
Yeah.
And no longer make that mistake. Now, let's say Brad 2.0 meets, I love fake names, Cassidy, and you guys are honest with one another and you tell her that you cheated. Cassidy probably isn't going to want to hear that.
Yeah.
She's probably going to side-eye it. She's probably going to feel a certain kind of way, which sucks.
Yeah.
But as a Brad 2.0, you have to know that that is a normal reaction. And hopefully you'd be able to explain, yeah, I did this and I've done all these other things to work on myself. Now, you're my first relationship post cheating. Mm-hmm. So I haven't put it to the test, but I hope that you can come along this journey with me and trust that I'm a different person. Now, I always tell my clients, we don't have a crystal ball. So we don't know anything, right? As far as what's going to happen in the future. But the hope would be that Cassie would be like, okay, you know what? I know enough to be able to say, okay, let's do this.
Yeah.
Will Cassidy have one eye open? Probably. And as a Brad 2.0, you have to know, again, that isn't a crazy response.
Right.
An issue that pops up with these Brads is that they say, well, I did that when I was younger. Well, this is a new situation.
It's like justifying it.
Yes. Why are you holding it against? No.
Yeah.
Infidelity is a huge issue that millions and millions of people face. Just because it's common doesn't mean that it's an easy experience to live with. And so you have to know, if you have cheated, that it's probably going to take time. And there's no particular number that will work for everybody.
Yeah.
So maybe the Cassidy would only need to see 6 months of this new Brad for her to feel confident. But maybe Sabrina would need 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, I do think that if you're this new person getting with the Brad 2.0, you can probably work on yourself too. If it's been an extended period of time and you're still feeling a certain kind of way. If it was a client of mine, I would challenge that and say, okay, maybe it's our anxiety. Because what has Brad said? What has he done? Is there any evidence that he will do it again?
Right.
If there's no evidence on the table, then I would say, maybe he is different and he'll never cheat again. But we will never know anything that hasn't happened.
Right.
So it is important to take that risk and to just choose to believe.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, this Brad 2.0 has to be realistic about what he's done, right? And not only how women or people in general perceive that, but also be willing to take if they're not willing to be with you because of that in your past. Because we don't know what's been in their past, right? They could have a history of being hurt by cheaters in their past. And so it's really sensitive to them. And so that might be a deal breaker for them. And you can't be mad at them for that. You did that and they don't want to get with you because you've done it, even though you've done all this work. And that sucks. But at the end of the day, like that's not your person then, right?
Hmm.
And so you might get with someone who is willing to give you the benefit of the doubt. You might be with someone who's willing to be on that ride with you and trust you in this. But that's not everyone's cup of tea. Not everyone is going to want to be the trial run because it's like that's a lot to ask someone. Now, I do think while I'm on the same page as you, once a cheater, always a cheater isn't necessarily always true because you do need to do all that work. I would venture to say most people don't do all that work,
Right.
right? They might do some of it, or they might have all the willpower in the world, but they're not going to do the work. And so, oftentimes, what you do see is people who cheat end up cheating again because they haven't done the work to understand why they did it in the first place,
Right.
right? Now, I do think if they did it when they were younger, that's not to justify why they did it or if they did it, but like they did it when they were 17 or 18 and they haven't done it again and they're now in a relationship when they were 30 and their partner's like, "Hey, have you ever cheated on someone?" The truth is, yes, they have, and that was 12 or 13 years ago and it hasn't happened since. And so I think both sides need to be realistic, right? The person getting with the former cheater and see that like, okay, he's been in 3 more relationships since that one he cheated in and he hasn't cheated again. So the odds are he won't cheat on me.
Right.
And so I think both need to be realistic, and there is a level of maturity on both ends that need to be true in order for that to really work out. Now, if you are in a relationship, and this is maybe a whole different topic, but if you're in a relationship and in that relationship, your partner cheats on you, now staying with that person, that's a whole different story, right? Because it's like that just happened, right? And yeah, I think that's definitely different because that's a direct hurt on that person.
Hmm.
And so there's a lot of pain that goes into that and a lot of damage control that needs to happen if it's going to work out at all. Now, I've seen relationships work out and come back after infidelity. Again, I think it's difficult and I do think it shouldn't be expected that it happens. If you cheated, you cannot be upset if your partner does not want to stay with you. Some people, that's a deal breaker for them. I know for us, that kind of is,
Yeah.
and that's even scary to think about because it's like the thought of not being with you is scary, and so
I would never.
no, I know, and I wouldn't ever either. But yeah, no, I think a lot of people they're just like, oh, I just did it once. Like, why are you gonna throw everything away? It's like, no, she's not throwing it away, but whoever's leaving is not throwing it away. You decided to do this, and you messed this up for the couple. Whatever the consequences are because of that, those are the consequences. Our actions have consequences.
Yeah.
Now, going back to the topic at hand, once a cheater, always a cheater. Again, I don't think in general it is true. However, I do think it oftentimes works out that way because people don't do the work.
Yeah. I have a question. What do we think about self disclosure? Do we think if you
Mm,
cheat, you have to tell your partner?
I do. Yeah. Because I'm a firm believer in the truth will always come out. So I would much rather, if I'm dating someone who has cheated in their past, I would much rather them tell me than me find out through like one of their friends or what like a family member. I'm like, oh, you never told me that. It's like, oh, I didn't think it was important. Then it becomes a whole thing, right?
Yes.
I think the partner should tell.
Yeah, because there's this whole lying by omission.
Right.
Because I've heard cases where they were like, well, you never asked.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry. I thought that I was getting with a faithful person, and that's kind of their thing. "Well, I didn't lie to you.
Yeah.
It just never came up."
No, that's a big thing to not come up.
Yeah, that would suck if we're at a family reunion or having a conversation at a party and it happens to come up, whether directly or indirectly. As the other partner, you would feel overwhelmed, you would feel
Yeah.
betrayed, you would feel like a fool, you would probably feel like you don't even know your partner.
You would be blindsided, and then there's all these questions that you're having in real time instead of just being able to have that private moment with your partner, right? It's just like in an example, like if you and I were dating and I told you that I cheated in my past, we could have that conversation there, work through those things, and I can let you know, like, hey, that was 10 years ago. I done X, Y, and Z, and I've been in two other relationships and that hasn't happened again. But I just wanted you to know, yeah, that way it can give you some comfort and some awareness of what has happened, what work has been done, and so you can trust that it won't happen again, right? But if you just find this out at a family reunion, right, then it's like, then you're just questioning everything.
And often the person who's receiving it, which is the person who has cheated, naturally gets defensive
Right.
because the person's coming at them strong, very accusatory. So it's a natural response for the former cheater to be defensive, but oftentimes that just doesn't end well. I was 17, or it was a drunken night in college.
Yeah.
It didn't mean anything. I haven't done it again. First of all, I would say if it happens out in public, maybe take some time and talk about it in
Yeah.
private. And if the person confronting can possibly do this, I would say try to regulate your emotions to get the former cheater to tell the story.
Mhm.
Because so often emotions are elevated, fingers are being pointed.
Right.
I don't know you. I can't trust you. Rash decisions possibly can be made when it could be easily explained. Now, some would say you can't easily explain cheating.
Right.
But again, if it was a situation, let's say, again, love making things up. He was in college. You were so down in the dumps because your grandma just died.
Mhm.
You didn't know how to process your emotions. Your partner at the time was working the graveyard shift, and you went to a party, drank too much, and slept with someone else. Does that negate everything you did? Of course not, but it does provide some context.
Yeah.
So you hearing that could be like, okay, it wasn't a situation where you were in this committed relationship with the person for 4 years and you had this 3 year sordid affair with your
Right.
secretary with a child across the town. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think there are levels to cheating.
Yeah.
So, could you in that moment hear your
Mm.
partner's heart and understand the complexity and possibly extend some grace? If this was my client, that would be my challenge. Now, it will take time. You always like to say this is a marathon, this is not a sprint. So, most likely you will not be able to extend that grace immediately,
Right.
but I would say put yourself in their shoes. The grandma who raised you, she died and you're 19 and you don't know anything about grief
Mhm.
and you're just trying to numb. I think that could be a situation where that couple can work through it and possibly come out on the other side. But again, you have to allow the person time to talk. Now, as a former cheater, you also have to be introspective and be willing to figure out, why did I cheat? What was going
Yeah.
on at the time? A lot of us aren't really aware of why we're thinking what we're thinking or why we're feeling what we're feeling. So you may need time as a former cheater to get there. But yeah, that's an opportunity to really sit with everything
Yeah.
and make sense of it so that way you can deliver it to your partner and try to overcome it.
Yeah, and I think as the one who has cheated, part of the work is understanding, like you said, like why you cheated, but then also looking at all of the factors that led up to it. Because it's not just an accident, right? It's not, you don't just accidentally sleep with someone. It's like, no, there's a lot of decisions that you made that led to that point, right? There was the decision to wait for them as they walk to their car. There was the decision to forego your task at work to talk to them in the break room, right? There was the decision to have lunch with them, even though you brought your lunch, right? Like, there's all these little decisions that add up to the end result of what people consider cheating. But I would consider really all of that the beginnings of cheating
Mm,
already, right? There's layers to it. But to sleep with someone when you are in a committed relationship, that was the end result of many poor decisions,
right.
you know?
And you can be remorseful and
Yeah.
regret it, but yeah. I do want to address the point that you mentioned about when you're currently partnered up
Oh, yeah, yeah,
and infidelity is occurring. What do you do? I think that can definitely be more tricky. And
yeah,
I think it really depends on, again, sitting down, having this vulnerable conversation and saying, I was feeling lonely. I was
mm,
feeling neglected. Sometimes, especially if kids are part of the equation, you were prioritizing the kids. Now, all of this is not blaming the
right,
other person. It's just providing some context to help the other person understand the state that the cheater was in. I didn't get the promotion at work. I
yeah,
actually got demoted. I was feeling stressed out by the state of the world,
mhm. Yeah,
right, which is
this is the
real.
case for a lot of people right now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I just had everything all pent up and didn't really know how to deal with it, and Sally just so happened to ask me how I was doing, and she had a nice smile, you know?
yeah.
Again, being vulnerable, which is very hard, and it's a cuss word for some people.
It really is.
Like,
Yeah,
a word that just makes people feel so uncomfortable. So I think that's key. And then again, as the partner receiving all this news, it's going to take time to process. And it's up to you to figure out what you have the capacity for.
yeah,
If you feel like, you know what, I'm going to give this a go, we can try to move forward, right? There was a rupture and we're going to try to move towards repair. You have to know that it will take a lot of time, energy, and effort. But if that's what you want to do, then go for it.
yeah,
I think couples therapy would be huge
really.
for a couple like this to be able to process it with a trained professional who can help them navigate things, who can be unbiased. But yeah, to the person who's just like, "No, that's a deal breaker. I can't." That's okay too. That person has every right to walk out the door. And as a person who cheated, you got to know that
It's a consequence.
that's a consequence. That's a very normal reaction. Again, a lot of times the person who cheated starts to go all up in arms about it,
Mhm.
can be really sharp with their words. And it's like, hold on, you cheated. I'm not acting this way out of the blue. I'm not having an overreaction. I'm having a very normal reaction to this large event that has
Right.
happened. And this is the new normal. Even if kids are involved, even if we've got property together and lots of assets and things like that, okay, guess we're gonna get an attorney and
Figure it
figure
out.
it out.
Yeah.
But the thing that I hate seeing in this situation is, again, when the cheater is just like, "But I don't wanna lose my family,
Yeah, it's like, well,
but I love my family." And it's like, well, honestly, did you love your family?
in that moment, you were not thinking about your family, because if you were, you wouldn't have done it.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, some may say, well, both things can be true. They can love their family and have a weak moment. And I would say, yes, both things can be true. I'm just saying, when everything gets surfaced and laid out on the table and they're begging and pleading, my question is, where was this same energy?
Right.
Now, maybe the person didn't have the capacity to deal with whatever was happening. That's very true. But again, it just boils down to natural consequences.
Yeah.
And sometimes that person has to hit rock bottom, right? You lose your family. You have to figure everything out in court. You're now maybe co-parenting and having to get an apartment on your own in a not so great part of town. Maybe that's what you need.
Yeah.
Maybe hitting rock bottom and realizing I've got to make TV dinners and I don't want to go on the apps. Maybe that's exactly what needed to happen for you to be introspective and figure out your stuff so that way you can grow. And hopefully, you'd be able to eventually meet another person and be a reformed cheater,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I kind of wanted to go back to what you had mentioned as far as some of the reasons why people cheat, right? Because like they were feeling lonely, they weren't feeling heard, all of these things. I love that you said you're not placing blame on the one who was cheated on because it can very easily turn into that, where it's your fault that I cheated. But on the other hand, I've heard so many stories where the person who was cheated on takes on the blame. It's like it was my fault that they cheated. And I just want anyone to know that it's never your fault that someone cheated on you. You didn't drive them to the person's house. You didn't take them out to lunch with them. Like, there was no part of it that was your fault. So again, even though someone may say this is why it happened, there are other ways to address that. You were feeling lonely. That's a valid feeling. A way to address that is talk about it, right? A way to address that is go to therapy, talk to your personal therapist if you don't know how to talk about it with your partner, right? Those feelings and those reasons for cheating that people give are valid. The feeling is valid, but the action to address the feeling is not okay.
Yeah. And I know there are people that are gonna think, I did tell them. It fell on deaf ears. I was dismissed. I was invalidated. To that, I would say, we've got to evaluate. Is this somebody that I want to be with?
Right.
Is this a psychologically safe environment to be in? This person is continuously treating me like I'm a ghost. Maybe I need to jump ship. I think that's kind of the elephant in the room with a lot of these cases. Why didn't you leave
Right. Before cheating.
before you cheated? But that person would say, but I wanted my family.
Yeah. You can't have your cake and eat it too.
You can't.
Yeah.
If your needs are continuously dismissed. In your episode, we were talking about how that was the
Yeah.
case for you, right? You just went through it. You could have easily been a person who was just like, you know what, forget this. I'm
Yeah.
going to go and find it elsewhere.
Find someone who's gonna meet my needs, who's gonna listen to me, who's gonna validate me. Yeah, I could have totally done that.
Yeah. But you did it. You actually left.
Yeah.
And so that was very bold. That was very courageous for you to do. And I am so glad you did that for many, many reasons. But yeah, when it comes to this person who's feeling that way, we've got to make some pretty large decisions, especially if it's just chronic. It's just moment after moment, and it turns out to be months and years of the same stuff. Leave. Now, the person may say, well, but I've got the kids and I've got a house,
Yeah.
and that's very real. Like all of that
Yeah.
stuff is extremely valid. That being said, it still doesn't justify
Yeah.
your cheating.
Because if you decide to cheat, it's gonna destroy it anyway.
Right.
And so it's like, might as well you take control of the situation and be like, I am going to leave because of X, Y, and Z, instead of cheating and then hurting people in the process and having a lot more damage control to pick up than if you just were to split it and go on your way.
Yeah.
Right. And I know it's easier said than done. It's not just a split and go. I know it costs money. I know there's a lot of things that go into play there. But yeah, the end is gonna be the same. Are you gonna make that process to get to that end a lot more difficult and hurtful for the people involved? Or are you gonna do it in a way that can keep people as safe as possible emotionally? Right. It's gonna hurt regardless. Cheating on someone is a really difficult thing to experience. Not only as a cheater, but as someone who's cheated on.
Yeah. And in case anyone is wondering, you and I have never cheated.
No. Yeah, we've never cheated on each other. I've actually never been cheated on.
No.
Yeah, okay.
So I've never cheated on any partner that I've been with, nor have I been cheated on.
Yeah, but
So,
we've talked to many people who this has been their story and just seen it a lot. And so I think it's been eye-opening to see just in the field that we're in, but also it makes me thankful for what we have, the fact that that hasn't been a part of our story because I know how difficult that is for people to navigate and walk through. I wouldn't wish that on anyone, but again, I know that that's the reality for a lot of people. So hopefully they'll be able to find the resources that they need to get through
yeah.
whatever it is that they're going through.
And one thing I want to mention, I do think there's a probably small group of society that should not be in a monogamous relationship.
Yeah.
I think they should be in a polyamorous relationship because they want to just be able to do whatever they want to do without restrictions. And hey, there is a group out there for
Yeah.
them. I think if more people recognize that about themselves, were really truthful, they could be set free. Now,
Yeah.
does this mean maybe moving to a certain area?
Yeah.
Does this mean maybe going out of your way to find a specific online community, probably. But, and I know there's all this debate on monogamy and how
Yeah.
we're not even really wired to be that way, especially when we compare it to different cultures, even
Right.
in the animal kingdom.
Right.
The fact, though, is that in our American society, especially, monogamy is what we all grow up with.
Right.
It's this,
It's a dominant culture. Right.
yes,
Yeah.
ideology that we subscribe to. And most of us, I don't know the stats, but I would say most of us are in agreement with that. But I do think, again, there's a group of society who they just don't. And that's fine. But again, why? I'm talking to the person who wants to be polyamorous but hasn't officially joined. Why are you continuously entering into monogamous relationships?
Yeah.
Hurting people time and time and time again. Now, I'm talking about the people who are not doing the work,
Yeah.
the people who are just kind of serial cheaters.
Hmm.
Be real with yourself.
And then they try to justify it. It's like, well, we're not meant to be monogamous. I'm like, well, why are you getting into a monogamous relationship? Does your partner that you're with know that you are not going to be monogamous? Did you communicate that?
Yeah.
I actually knew a guy. Well, I knew someone whose brother was this way. He would say he's in an open relationship, and they asked, "Does your girlfriend know it's an open relationship?" He's like, "Oh yeah, I think she knows." It's like, bro, what? You cannot be a one-sided open relationship. That means you're just cheating.
That is, and I bet he thought he was slick.
Yeah, he's like, yeah, it's an open relationship. She knows what it is. It's like, I don't think she did know what it is.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, I agree. I think some people, they're just polyamorous by nature, right? And again, I think there are communities for that, and there are people that fall into that lifestyle, right? And so if that is you, one, communicate expectations, because I know that there was a girl actually in one of my grad school classes that was going to be her specialty, like polyamory and kinks and all these things. Like it was my sex therapy class that I had, and she was very big on all of that. And yeah, she said one thing that is so imperative in polyamorous relationships is communication, because there can be jealousy, there could be someone's getting more attention than someone else, right? And so there's just like all of these different dynamics. Monogamous relationships are difficult as it is, right? Just with communication. And so when you have more people, it's just going to be that much more difficult, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's possible for some people, and I think it just requires a lot more honest, open, vulnerable communication. And so, you have any more to say on the cheater side of things?
Yes, I definitely want to close just kind of speaking towards the person who has cheated. I can imagine there's a lot of guilt, there's a lot of shame involved. And I just want to say that you're not a monster. You're not a person who should be banished,
Right.
right? You're a person who probably had a lot of unmet needs and unfortunately made some poor decisions to meet those needs.
Yeah.
And so I would say you're human. That being said, do the work.
Hmm.
Figure out why you are the way that you are. Now, again, could it be a situation like we described as far as like grandma died and there's work stuff and you're really not that way? Yes. But also figure out, are you a person who subscribes to polyamory? And if so, join that community and stop entering into monogamous relationships
Yeah.
or this fake, I'm in an open relationship and my partner probably knows it.
Yeah.
Be real, be honest. People love honesty, authenticity. Be a very real person and stop being fake and stop being a person who is running away from your problems.
Hmm.
Be bold, be courageous, be willing to sit in the discomfort, talk to a therapist. But I always say, I understand that that's a privilege for a lot of us. If you cannot go to therapy, Google is free.
Yeah. Chat GPT is also free.
So do some
Yeah.
little research, jump on YouTube, read some books,
Yeah. Really.
be willing to do the work, and I bet you'll start to see some change.
Yeah. 100%. So you're ready to get into your mood of the moment?
Yeah,
Okay. Do you want to go first, or do you want me to go
you can
first?
go.
Okay. For me, my mood, I don't know. What is my mood right now? I think honestly, I am always I feel like my life these days has always been just one of gratitude, just because of where I'm at in life, just relationally and emotionally and financially and vocationally, like all of these different things. I think 10, 20 years ago, if I were to look at my future self, I would be like, "Oh my gosh, that's gonna be your life? Like, that's awesome." I love the life that I have with you, and so I'm just like that's something I'm trying to get better at, really, is just exercising gratitude on a more consistent basis, just because there are so many things to be grateful for. Yes, hard things still happen, right? Difficult things still happen, stressful things still happen, and that doesn't take away from the good that's happening, right? And I always tell my clients this, like, it's not about toxic positivity where you're just like, "Oh, just think about the good things." It's like, no, the good things are there, yes, and the bad things are there. But if we only focus on the good or only focus on the bad, it's going to create a skewed version of what our life looks like, and so I think with my brain, I tend to think of the things that I don't have or the things that I am doing wrong. Like that's just kind of where my brain naturally has gone historically. And so I think for me, just looking at the things that I'm grateful for has been really helpful just to kind of create a more realistic picture of what my life really is. So for
Mhm.
those reasons, I'm just really thankful for where I'm at.
I love that.
Yeah.
Let's see, my mood of the moment. I'm feeling just very inspired. And like last week, I was just talking about my health and fitness journey.
Mm,
And I'm also just feeling inspired to really work harder in my private practice when it comes to my clients, doing extra research outside of the session to help myself understand what's going on with them and how to best assist them with their needs. Once I do that, help them understand themselves better and just feeling inspired to just work on things financially. It's easy to swipe my little card and
yeah.
not update our financial management system.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, that's a part of adulting. It's a really important thing to do. As a private practice owner, I owe taxes. And so just kind of being inspired to be more on top of that and things like that. Instead of running away from things, instead of procrastinating, I'm just inspired to do it, face it
Yeah.
head on, sit in the discomfort. Also, a lot of the times, and people may resonate with this, I procrastinate when I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah. You don't
So,
like to feel like you don't know what you're doing, so you avoid that for a longer time.
right.
Yeah.
So then send an email, pick up the phone, talk to someone smarter than me. We meet with a financial planner, so let me hit her up. I have a team of tax professionals that I work with. Shoot them an email, right? I'm not alone. We're paying for these services.
Yes, we are.
So might as well utilize
Yeah.
them. But also Google is free.
Mm,
So there are some things I can look up myself as well. So I'm just in a good spot and I'm
yeah.
excited about it.
And I love hearing you talk about your private practice, and I'm so proud of you every time I think about your private practice. It's been, like, 2.5 years, almost 3 years at this point, and I remember, like, when before even starting your practice and those first few, like, sessions, like, how just nervous you were, and, like, it was, like, an excitement, but also, like, a nervousness, like, "Oh, can I do this?" Right? I mean, it's like, I knew you could do it, and I think deep down you knew you could do it, and so to see you doing it and thriving has been really cool to see.
Ah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I definitely had a bad case of imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm just a baby. But I definitely had to remind myself, girl, you went to school, you did all these clinical hours, you've probably seen thousands of clients at this point
Yeah,
over all of these years. So you're good.
yeah,
And if there's any therapists listening, beyond all of the clinical terms and therapeutic modalities that we use, just be yourself because your
yeah,
personality goes really far
yeah.
when it comes
Being I'm sorry, go ahead.
when it comes to connecting to your clients. You can spew out all this fancy psychology jargon all day long, but if you're not a real person, if you're a robot, you're probably not going to have many clients.
Yeah,
And so it's okay to speak casually as far as think about the way that you talk to your friends, the way that you talk to your family.
yeah,
You can do that in therapy. Obviously, it's very different, but the tone and the word choice and things like that can be comparable. Obviously, you're going to also mix in the other stuff too. All of that together is going to most likely make you a good clinician.
right.
That's something that really resonated with me from the very beginning. And I think it's part of the reason why I do have a successful practice.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree with that 100% because, like, when people go into the field of counseling, they tend to be, anyway, a naturally empathetic person already. And so, yeah, for me, I would just lead with that, like lead with my natural personality, lead with my natural empathy and curiosity. And I just happen to have these extra tools that I've learned, that I've been trained in, that I can use when I see the need for that. And so, yes, on the one hand, it's like talking to anyone else, but yeah, you have a lot of extra tools that you could use at your disposal. And so I do think it is a lot less scary than people make it out to be who are just getting into the field.
Yeah.
But
All
anyway,
right. Thank you guys. As always, we appreciate every single person who listens. Be sure to subscribe, to like this, leave a comment. Let us know your thoughts about this topic. We definitely want to know. I'm sure there are things that we didn't talk about that would be really interesting to read. Thank you.